July 17th, 2007. Subject regarding, my husband picked it out for me. He knows the real me. Reply, okay, Mrs. 007 Cupid, you spy. Did you notice your plate number? Reply, we'll call you when I get a chance. I work very close to that Tim Hortons you were at. Reply, I don't think I'm supposed to buy anything, 'cause I've been studying the news lately, and the walls are crashing in very soon. Just this morning, what do you think I saw in CNN? Major topic, the Roswell flying saucer mystery. A rather larger panel discussing it. Guess what do you think this means? Just last night, well, History Channel. Hatchet putt, the Queen, finally located and proven beyond a doubt. The latest technology on gene matching, a very exacting process. No expense spared here. This is important because this was the first time that a large society of any scale was coordinated and ruled, but I haven't figured out why exactly yet. As to why he makes such a big deal about it, because she was evidently nearly wiped from memory. Nearly all indications of her were systematically removed. Another of Nostra's predictions. The other half of what I sent you several months ago. So what does this mean? There are just days or at most a few weeks before something totally incredible happens? Forever changing. I already told you some of it. I would like to elaborate here, but I'm not even supposed to be on the airwaves according to N. But the best part is that you have found a queen. Well, I'll be finished here in a few days, or sooner if needed, to see this queen. Let me know soon, just how soon you want me down there. I'll try to check tomorrow, or you can phone me. Do leave your address details here, 'cause I'm good at forgetting these days. A hard copy is always more permanent. You're being mysterious, or is it facetious? I had to dig deep for this word, had no idea how to spell it. Wish this place had internet so I could have time to write more at ease, 'cause it's at some university sublet office, for I don't know how long. And it's 20 kilometers from here. Maybe I've had too much coffee this morning, 'cause can't relate too good just now. Love you. Reply, hello there, stranger. Where are you now, and have you bought anything yet? How are you doing? Forwarded message. The Roswell incident. This has been the biggest mystery in the U.S. for the past 60 years, till today when I am revealing it right now before your eyes. This Roswell incident is only actually an extension of what is as well known as the Philadelphia experiment. For those who don't know this, this is where the U.S. had an experiment led by scientist W.K. Jessup. This was originally supposedly to create an electrical cloak around a warship so that it would not be visible. In theory this could happen, but the psychology behind it was not comprehensive enough to achieve the desired result. But instead the outcome was indeed much more promising. Instead of a measly cloaking action, the consequence was relocation. For the amount of energy to produce this result, there was certainly much more of a reaction than was ever imagined. But because there was just too much haste in this project and not enough thought on the safety of the occupants, the project was more of a disaster than a scientific endeavor. The result was that all those participants in the boat were indeed affected by electrical radiation, depending on where they were on the boat at the time. Each acquired slightly different results. Some guys were just barely visible, walking around begging for assistance, because they didn't know what had happened to them. Because reality was now very different than they had known, just moments before the ship was energized. Some were able to walk through walls or fall through the usually solid floor. Others were actually stuck within the structure, just like one might see in a magic show. A person cut in half. Well, this was happening for real, except that their bodies were now part of the surrounding material, but intact and stuck and immovable. In a boat this was steel plate. 'Twas not possible to do anything for any of them. For others, some were seen in certain recognized bars that they indeed were known to have had preferences for. In other words, these were experiencing similar effects that are well documented to happen to ghosts. This experiment didn't go well with the Navy or the public that witnessed this. However, this showed great promise. So another experiment was started inland, Area 54. Then came the time for the live testing. Somebody thought of using troubled individuals in those intermittent Japanese camps. So half a dozen were picked out, placed in this prepared heavy-duty pipe. This now craft, because it is about to transport these unlucky Japanese bunch some distance, gets energized and it does not take off and disappear. Again, the result of haste was not factored into this experiment, and the craft lands many miles away in the town of Roswell, in a field. Those who first saw this incredible happening were quite puzzled and called the law, then the army. As soon as the tube was located by the army, it became instantly a point of top secret. Next comes the cover-up stories. Some farmers actually saw these aliens. Aliens was the correct title for these hapless Japanese bunch because none of these locals had seen a Japanese person before. But there is a little problem that none have indeed gave much thought to, and that is, some of these Japanese were still alive, partly cooked by the radiation effect that sent them to this situation, and quite clearly asked for help. Now, what other alien other than a Japanese American would ask for help in English? I believe there were originally 6, even though there was only 5 to be found in the craft. Therefore, the other one actually turned to a ghost instantly upon energized. The rest, because of the instantly radiation-cooked action, were also bloated. This is the main reason these locals never actually recognized these Japanese as so, reflecting even much later. In bold and italics, this paragraph was not included because I was rather rushed at the time. Poisoned. I had described this craft last year. The cover-up following this craft landing begs the question, why try to hide the result of this incredible experiment? The simplest reason of all is, again, the final result far exceeded the expectations desired from energizing the craft. More simply, the formulas used at the time were nowhere near accurate or ever close for this new branch of science. And of course, how do you explain those aliens? And of course, those devils, the Russians, might get wind of this experiment, and then what? Competition? Woo! I really thought I had the story of the century when I finally pieced it together a few years ago. Tried to sell it to the TV people, but I was not able to get a cup of coffee for it, so now I'm making this available to all. The reality of it is probably that it is indeed a 60 mystery and would give a damn anyway. 200,000 Japanese or thereabouts were vaporized and or died from radiation shortly afterwards, just 2 years prior at the end of World War II. I also contacted several directors and others, not shown because I'm not connected properly with the internet, so I had to use Yahoo. Much slower. Email titled Aggravation. Oh yes! Yes! The U.S. is supposed 9 trillion in debt to the Chinese? From what I have noticed in different dealings around the world and here is that both the CIA and FBI are indeed totally out of control. Out of control meaning that the chief is not aware of their many questionable acts. Constantly aggravating me should not be one of their most top priorities. If the chief only knew how prohibitively expensive they have been to him. Alas, who is really at fault here though? It must be the Chinese, of course. Why? Well, I believe it is because the Chinese are financing the U.S., because the news tells us so. Therefore, the Chinese must also be considered terrorists, as per previous email. But there is a problem with this logic, because the U.S. for the past year, it seems, has been trying to break their economy in different ways. Just a few days ago, the news reported that the Chinese spies were well in control of much of the U.S. technology secrets and exporting at home. If this previous paragraph is correct, then logic would have it that in fact the US must therefore not be dependent on the Chinese for financing. Henceforth I cannot see the US aggravating the Chinese so much, if indeed they were so indebted to the Chinese. There must only be one conclusion then. The US is indeed bankrupt to the tune of, I believe, to be closer to 15 trillion, if you count the money that was made for Iraq, Afghanistan, the many others that have also been paid off. So there is quite a lot of American money out there. Just what would happen if it all came home? Too much money circulating. Let's hope that doesn't happen anytime soon, because both our economies would be in horrific problems. Maybe there's another problem. Must be Iran. Yes, Iran. Because in fact they have a money printing machine given them by the US, mostly for the use of acquiring weapons of war. How so? This goes back to when the US was supplying weapons of war and also financing to Saddam in Iraq, in the Iran-Iraq wars. Yes, Saddam was promised many things by the US, so he could conquer Iran. But after a reasonable amount of time, the situation was not working out so smoothly, and 3/4 through the process, somehow he figured out the US plan. The US plan was to get Iraq and Iran to mostly destroy each other. Then, just before the dust settled, the US was supposedly going in and saving and taking over Iran from the really bad guy, Saddam. Then the world would be praising the US, like has been done many times elsewhere, and having free oil. Because if need be later, 'twould be so much easier to conquer Iraq than Iran if Saddam got out of control. Like many well thought out plans, it actually worked out backwards. While the CIA has blundered many times, I really thought 'twas more like a near perfect surgical cut, but there were a few witnesses. When they cut off that section of highway in Ottawa, was it? I forget exactly, but around there somewhere where 5 were killed, I seem to remember just over 2 years ago. Perhaps they were letting off steam, or just showing off their precise skills, or was it to objectify something else? 'Twas more technical than the pyrotechnics. FBI, CIA philosophy is so far removed from reality that it is no wonder the country is at the brink of collapse. Anyhow, I'm just envisaging 'tis none of these. Must be the ghosts of Christmases past, is all 'cause the US has to blame some phantom for their plight.